Only 6 months ago, renowned psychologist Dr. Murphy was discredited for unethical practices in his last experiment.
I knew the risk going into such a thing, but I didn't care. I was going to make groundbreaking success. Even if no one accepted my methods today, they would appreciate it tomorrow.
Unfortunately, no one has yet appreciated his experiment. It became clear to Dr. Murphy the day he received a letter of grievances from the participant and a court notice from the state that his methods had reached unethical status. So, tell me, Dr. Murphy, what exactly was this experiment? What was your aim?
Well, just as any experiment, I needed to have a strong, clear, testable goal. The goal for this experiment was to determine whether or not someone would go crazy from being locked in a closet for 72 hours. My hypothesis was that they most certainly would. Most people would find this a little bit unorthodox, but I believe it's well worth the risks.
What about the experiment did the APA say was unethical?
Well, APA determined that if the mental or physical risks for a participant are too high, I can be reported to either local or state ethical committees, or to the university I previously worked for. My colleague reported me to Stanford University, and now they'll put an end to my experiment 2 days early.
What inspired you to conduct an experiment with these kind of risk factors that elicited such an extreme response?
My inspiration certainly came from my predecessor, Philip Zimbardo. He made a very similar experiment back in 1971. He had 24 healthy male volunteers act as either inmates or guards in a prison. They got paid $15 a day, while my participant got paid $20 a day. It was probably his audacity, though, that made me want to do something so similar as him for an experiment.
But Zimbardo had the consent of his participants. The APA guidelines clearly state that all participants have to be informed of the procedures of the experiment, have to give their consent, must be reminded that they can leave at any given time during the experiment, and that their confidentiality must be secured. Were you able to provide these guidelines to your participant?
Absolutely not. I was afraid that if I informed the participant of the experiment's true nature, she would have developed participant expectations, where she would have made her own hypothesis on what to do and how to do it. I needed the situation to be as authentic as possible, so all I told her was that she was going to spend a few hours in a spacious and luxurious room. This room.
But the main issue with both the participant and the APA was the risk of mental and physical damage to the participant. Do you think that if the participant knew about the experiment, she would last longer before reaching insanity?
I was worried about that, yes. Like the guidelines say, no experiment should be conducted if there are dangerous risks to the participant's mental and physical well-being. My experiment was testing the endurance of mental and physical well-being, so I think that if she knew that, she wouldn't have even participated, or would have held out much longer than I hypothesized.
Could you not have tested the theory accurately using animals instead?
Like with the person, I would have had to minimize discomfort, illness, and pain. Procedures are subject to animals. To distress can only occur when there are no other options. And since I wanted to know more about human psyche in this regard, I thought it more authentic to have a person in a closet, not an animal.
So you were attempting a naturalistic observation of the participant. How are you able to study her with hidden cameras?
Well, in a naturalistic observation, I can't control any variables or factors, so I couldn't interfere with her by seeing her in person. So yes, I did use hidden cameras. I also recorded her screams.
On the list of grievances, did the participant say anything about that? How it may have compromised her privacy?
She mentioned something about how finding the cameras made her think I was the kidnapper, which is somewhat understandable. I didn't really conduct the experiment exactly as I should have, so I lost some credibility because of that.
What happened to the participant after the experiment?
Oh, she was hospitalized because she had no food or water for 2 days. Also, she was having severe symptoms of depression and borderline schizophrenia. There were periods of time whenever she would just cry and scream for hours. So, I also turned off the lights and didn't speak to her. I made her think she was completely alone. Should have mentioned that.
Did you feel any remorse for her actions after she escaped at all?
I did feel pretty bad after she escaped. She spent so long whittling down that lock until it finally broke, and I only paid her $20. Come to think of it, she probably deserved more like $35 or $40. Whenever I arrived at the hospital, she had already told my colleagues and the police what happened, and at that point I was pretty much fired already.
What did the APA say about your inhumane procedures?
Oh, the APA? They said I was the worst psychologist ever born. Borderline insane and sociopathic myself. But what most people say about you isn't true, and it's not true about me. I was very thoughtful and calculated the entire time. I had my theory, the broad explanation of my goal, an experimental hypothesis, variables, everything to make a good experiment. And if I had none of these, the experiment would have gone the way it was supposed to. And if she hadn't escaped, of course.
Despite the APA discrediting you, did a third-party panel ever validate your data? And do you think, if not you, someone else might replicate the experiment to reprove your hypothesis?
There's already been one group that has worked on reproving my hypothesis. You can meet them right now. And I'm sure that many other groups soon will also try to replicate the experiment. Once they have many experiments, they can meta-analyze them, combining each experiment into an overall conclusion. They could replicate the same one, since an experiment's repeat helps track a progress over time and helps with validity. Someone has to be brave enough to ask the bigger questions. What makes us insane? What makes someone go crazy? Is it a lack of physical resources, social interaction, or both? There are a lot of questions to what makes us insane, and what makes a good experiment. I may have done everything wrong, but sometimes doing everything wrong is right.
Knowing that you're facing criminal allegations alleged by your participant, do you hope to eventually return to your own experiment?
Absolutely. Even though I'll be going to jail for a while, I figure maybe whenever I come back I can even use the same participant if I offer a few more dollars this time. Maybe I can even use her friends and family as secondary trials. If you get more test subjects, can make a test more precise.
And while I still have you, what would you like to change about the experiment?
I would get some stronger locks this time.
And that concludes our interview with the infamous and uncouth Dr. Murphy, psychologist of the century. Thank you.